Well, hello, wonderful friends. Teresa Lusk here with the Teresa Lusk Show. And I have a wonderful powerhouse of a guest, Martha Zoller. Martha, welcome to the Teresa Lusk Show.
Thanks, Teresa. Great to be with you.
Yes, it's wonderful. Listen, I've looked you up, I've done some research, and I actually had the pleasure of being on your radio show just recently. But I want to tell our viewers who you are because you have this dynamic, fun background. I'm all things, women who have just gained so much. And so Martha Zoller is a conservative media personality and political consultant. She's from Gainesville, Georgia, and she has her own radio show, The Martha Zoller Show, on WDUN. And she's worked with key political figures such as Governor Brian Kemp and Senator David Perdue. She's been on CNN. Yes, you heard it. CNN, MSNBC, and so many other media outlets. And she has a degree in political science, a master's, in fact. And so you have this amazing, fun background. I think if I could have started all over again, Martha, I would have gone the route that you did. But welcome to the Teresa Lusk Show. Thank you for giving us your time. I can't wait to talk to you some more.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Martha, I, wanted to have our viewers get to know you because I think you're maybe somebody who has been making some serious strides in the conservative political media realm. And I think that you've been around so many things, you've seen so many things. So today we're going to discuss a few. But first of all, would you tell us, how did you get into this political world? Did you just wake up one day and go, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, I've always been political, and I got to say, it started around the dinner table when I was a kid. My dad was the kind of person, he was a World War II veteran and a POW survivor, and we always talk current events at the dinner table. So it was something that I have kind of always had around me, but I didn't get into the political stuff until I was in my 30s. I had a journalism background, but like a lot of people, when they graduated from college, I took a different job because I needed a job. And so I spent about 10 years working in retail where I got to spend other people's money, which kind of makes me like Congress. So, you can do that. And then, when I was in my 30s, I was going through the transition that a lot of people in Georgia were moving from Southern Democrat to Republican. Southern Democrats were conservative, okay, but we started voting Republican. And so at that time, I had the opportunity to start doing some segments on the local radio station here, a family-owned station, WDUN, family group of stations, and people liked me, and so I started doing a couple of days a week, then 3 days a week, then every day, then we worked up to 3 hours a day. And it was just one of those organic things that just kind of grew from being a caller and then getting asked to come on. And from that, I started volunteering on campaigns and doing that sort of work from a volunteer basis, helping especially women in politics, that kind of thing. And then I ran for Congress myself in 2012 and got to the runoff, lost in the runoff. But through that experience, met David Perdue. And David Perdue asked me to come on board and help him with his communications. And I did that. And then he won in 2014, which was a big win year for Republicans. And I helped him stand up his field office. So I got to travel all around the state of Georgia, from every small town to every big town, meeting people everywhere. And I always say to all my clients, don't forget the shorts and t-shirt people. Don't forget the folks. And I think that's what a lot of politicians make the mistake of doing. And then Brian Kemp supported me in my congressional run at a bit of a political cost to him for a period of time. And so when he came time to run for governor, I of course supported him for governor, and I got to do the same kind of thing for him and stood up his field office in his official office. And then at that point in time, I felt like I could help him more with his reelect if he wasn't signing my paycheck. And so I had the opportunity to go back into radio again. And in the interim, I worked for different people, which is radio's kind of a vagabond business anyway. So I've worked for Cox Media Group. I've worked for stations in Athens and Atlanta, as well as in Gainesville. But I also have been able to build this media career doing television because cable news, the double-edged sword of cable news is there's 24 hours to fill. That's the good side and the bad side. But the
Right.
bad side is they repeat a lot of things that aren't true. Okay. But the good side is they needed a lot more voices. So my
Mm.
career came along with that. And so I started doing CNN and Fox and MSNBC, and I've been on PBS NewsHour and just in all different kinds of ways been able to be available, starting out in the middle of the night, things like that, and then getting better time slots as time went on. And I think that it's one of the things I'm proudest of is I've been able to build this career out of Gainesville, Georgia, while I was raising my family and keeping my marriage going and doing all that kind of stuff. Because maybe I would have been more successful if I'd gone to New York or LA, but I wouldn't have the same kind of life that I've had. And so it works out well all the way around. And then I went back to school in 2016 and got my degree in American politics and studied women's electoral success. So I've had a blast, and I love conservative politics. I think we have the best ideas if we communicate them well, and that's what I try to do.
That's beautiful. One of the things that when you talk about, language and what you studied, for the women's electoral studies, I think that's powerful because you said something, one of the messages that I'm, trying to share across the media outlets right now is that conservative women need to rise up to the call of this political passion that I think so many of us could be effective in, and not just women, but I am a voice for women. So I will push that. But you said something that it hits home because I think a lot of us, not that liberal women don't, but the majority, a lot of conservative women, we often focus more on our houses, on our homes and building that and making that healthy so that when we do take off a little faster, doesn't mean we don't play on both fields, but when we take off a little bit faster, it's because our families are already settled and the kids are doing what they need to do, et cetera, et cetera. So I love that you did that. Speaking of women, I heard one of your interviews with Linda McMahon, and I loved it. I took a little snippet of it because you said something that was so simple, yet it had that punch for the day, and I thought I've got to let the viewers hear this. So let me share this clip real quick. This is from your radio show, and it looked like it wasn't that long ago, maybe a couple months ago. And for those who don't know,
It was
Linda
right before the
McMahon.
election. Yeah.
There you go. So, and for those of you who don't know, Linda McMahon, she was the co-founder of they called it WF, but now they had to change it after so many years to WE. But she was the administrator of the Small Business Administration. So take a listen.
That's what the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act did for small businesses. And when I would go back and talk to these business owners, and they would tell me that they reinvested the money they saved back into their companies, we saw economic growth. We saw the economy flourish under President Trump. So he used to tell me when I would accompany him on different events when he spoke, and if he was referencing small businesses, he would always acknowledge me in the audience, and he would say, Linda, he said, we always have to remember that small business is really big business because it drives the economy in our country.
Well, and
so how Kamala Harris could say he hates small business, I think she plucked that out of the air.
Well, the most interesting people I have met in my life have been small business people who grew, in many cases, to be big business people. But the thing that they had in common is they, one, weren't afraid to be broke, so they were willing to take risks. And they also didn't let a setback,
Well, how about that? I mean, great. First of all, you're talking to a powerhouse of a woman as well, two powerhouses talking one to another. But that business encouragement and just in the way that you were addressing that, tell us a little bit about those who are watching, because this is not just about politics. This is about empowerment. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think risk-taking is all a part of the American dream. The American dream is not being rich necessarily. The American dream is that you have opportunity and that your children have more opportunity than you did. So that can impact people at any level, whether they're just starting out or they've been around for a long time. And I think that's what a lot of people miss. It's not just about being wealthy. And starting businesses is very important because it's taking that chance. And while I said you can't be afraid to be broke, because sometimes you're going to make mistakes. And quite frankly, you learn the most from the mistakes that you made. You don't learn from success. You learn some things from success, but the main, it's really true that you learn more from failure than you do from success. And that's why you see people going through and doing the kinds of things they do. I mean, in addition to my own career that I've managed through all this, I helped my husband manage his medical practice. He and I now have a business where we have a nursing business that we manage. And so you've got to be able to have kind of a lot of irons in the fire all the time. And it's those risk takers that are really powerhouse, like you like to say, powerhouse conservative women.
Yes, I think that's wonderful. I think that we need to think about beyond the political realm, because I think that, obviously you're very politically involved. Your show is about politics, which I think is absolutely wonderful, but you are more than just a political commentator, a political analyst. You are a businesswoman. You're one who has broken barriers, and you're an example for even our granddaughters. I have 2 granddaughters, and I can't wait to see what kind of possibilities they're going to tap into. So I love that. I love what you're doing with that. You've also been on CNN and MSNBC, and this is a little bit of an older clip, but I thought I've got to show this because this is some common sense commentary. So let the viewers see this. And before I play this, this is actually a story about a young man. It's kind of an unfortunate situation. Tyler Clement took his own life because of some same-sex activity that was put online. And you're having a debate type conversation. But I love the way you clarify something. So I want our viewers to see this.
Don't ask, don't tell discharges pending the Pentagon's review of policy is because they wanted to be able to build consensus to get the votes in the Senate. Well, that didn't happen. The Senate did not pass Don't Ask. It did not repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So there's absolutely no excuse for the president to not now suspend discharges. What we're telling youth like this young man is that it is not okay to be gay, that they cannot serve in the military, that just the fact that they are gay alone is enough reason to discharge them, and that they need to hide it, and it needs to be in secret. And that's what leads to the feeling of ostracism, to the feeling of less than, that whatever other problems this young man had, this made it much, much worse. So it starts at the top, and there's no reason that that should not begin today.
But in this particular case, this may not just be about whether there was homosexuality involved. There have been several of these bullying via social networking kind of cases that have happened in the last few months, where a young girl killed herself, 2 instances where young girls killed themselves, where their behavior was called into question. They were called words that I can't say here on social networking sites. The same kind of feelings were at play here. So I don't think this is just about homosexuality. I think, though, this is about where boundaries are.
Go ahead, Jane.
Gay youth, LGBT youth, are 3 times as high at risk for suicide as non-LGBT youth. So clearly there's something going on there beyond just, it's social networking or something. This is the message that we're sending down.
While I accept Jane's point about the gay and lesbian community and suicides, believe me, I've been in public schools. My kids went to public schools. There are still the issues where girls are treated differently because of their behavior and called those same names as when we were in school, and it affects their behavior, and boys are too. So we've got a whole big issue, and it starts at home too, with parents talking openly about these issues.
Wow. What was going on during that time? I mean, I was watching this and going, okay, this is back in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. What was going on during that time? And tell us a little bit about the media relationship to the public.
Well, and I think that obviously this was at the beginning really of social media and that kind of thing. We called it social networking at the time. And I think that what happened is that, bullying, you can't compartmentalizing the bullying doesn't mean that you're going to answer the questions any better. The bottom line is it is difficult to be an adolescent. That's what we were talking, adolescent from 10 to about 25 really, or where you are fully mature. And that we've got to not just try to pit one group against another. We've got to really look at the overall issues related to this.
Yes, absolutely. Was the media any different back then? I mean, it didn't seem like it. It was like watching something from 2024, to be honest with you. But was the media different? What would you say was the dynamic?
Well, I think that it's gotten a little narrower, if you want to know the truth. I mean, there aren't as many opportunities for people to be on as there were in the past, but I think that there are a lot of opportunities for people to get the message out. What's changed is things like X taking over and things like other kinds of kind of crowd. I don't want to call them crowdsourcing, but where people can post their opinions immediately. And I think
Mhm.
that also what I try to do is that while I talk about my issues all the time, I also try to bring in real life. Like just today on X, I posted a couple of pictures from a Christmas concert that I did and made the point that, I sang in a choir for the first time in 35 years and it's not all politics. So we've got to
Mm.
humanize each other. We've got to talk to each other in a way that we respect each other, even though we might disagree. So where I think it has been different, at least how I approach it, is I'm not as combative as I was 15 years ago. I'll admit that. But just because I really think it's more important for us to acknowledge the things we have in
Mhm.
common rather than the things that are different. Because I do believe, as I said before, that conservative ideas are the best. But if I can't get people to listen to me that maybe aren't on my side, then I'm never going to be able to convince them.
That's right. I agree. I actually have some liberal friends, and one of them's a very close friend. Usually we stay away from politics. We put our issues on the table, talk them out very clearly and with very much detail. Um, but we have this great relationship. I disagree with her passionately about a whole lot of things. But those things aside, we are so human. We can cry together, we can talk together, we can laugh together. So I absolutely love that. I love the not so combative comment. Martha, I think that the dehumanization of people has caused a lot of the violent outbreaks, and we forget, like, we all bleed the same way, we cry the same way, and we take our power with our vote. Yeah. And
It's interesting because there was a show on BBC World Service a couple of years ago where they took people that were arguing with each other online and then had them introduced to each other in person. And
mm,
there was a particular story where the Home Secretary for the UK was an Indian woman who was very anti-immigrant in the idea of these texters, okay, these people that were going after her on Facebook. And there was one particular guy that was really giving her a hard time. So they got the two of them, the Home Secretary and this man, together, and they talked. And at the end of it, they asked the gentleman, "Would you be as likely to go after her again?" And he goes, "Well, no, because now I know her, and I found out she's a single parent like I'm a single parent. I found out that we
mm,
had a lot of the similar backgrounds, that she had come from an immigrant background, and so now I understand her perspective a little more." So there's a line I use on my show almost every day. I say that you need to parent your children, you need to vote, and you need to have a face-to-face conversation with someone.
there
And that
you
if
go.
you do those things, you can make things better as time goes on.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice to give people. It does get a little scary when we don't care for each other. Tell us a little bit about your work with Governor Kemp. What was that like, and what did you learn from that? What are some great, just two little nuggets that you can share with our viewers about what that was like?
Well, first of all, Brian Kemp is one of the most amazing politicians. He has been traveling around the state for years in different capacities. And I can tell you that every Farm Bureau office in Georgia has got an iteration of his business card on the bulletin board. He has
Mm,
had the same cell phone number all of that time, and you can
wow.
communicate with him by cell phone. That's one thing that is just fantastic. But the other thing is how he handled the post 2020 election situation, because he was no longer the Secretary of State, he was the governor. And he did not get in the middle of the election challenges that were going on. And he took a lot of abuse from the president elect related to that. And there were a lot of people that thought, this was before his reelection, that he was going to be done, that would be it. I got to tell you, he went to the Georgia GOP convention in 2021. He was booed. Okay. He went out into the hallway and he answered questions from voters for 3 hours, an hour and a half before and an hour and a half afterwards. He took every question from every person, one-on-one, face-to-face, and I was sitting off to the side kind of watching this, and I was like, he's going to be fine. This is the turning point, and it actually was. And in fact, he won bigger in his reelection than he did in his first election. And so he was able to do the work. He just put his head down. He also did a fantastic job managing COVID because we were the first state. Ron DeSantis likes to say he was the first state to open up. He wasn't. We were.
We're getting real political. I love it.
Right. That's right. But I mean, we were the first state to open up, and he handled the whole situation of keeping people at work and keeping people safe throughout COVID.
That's wonderful. So what would you say are some strong things that you learned from it that you apply today to your day-to-day life, maybe to your professional life, your personal life, even your spiritual life?
Well, I tell you, first of all, you look at everybody like a human being and you talk to everyone. Okay. And nobody is more important than somebody else. That's especially if you're going to be looking for their vote, right? Everybody's vote counts the same.
Yes.
So working for Brian Kemp was fantastic. Working for David Perdue was fantastic. They ran against each other for governor in 2022, which made me like the most uncomfortable person in Georgia, but I was able to get through that. Because it's really interesting, because if you work for a political figure like that, it's a little bit like being an indentured servant. You don't just quit. Okay. So you have to have, you talk to the person, they kind of sign off on what you're going to do next. It's not that you need their permission. It's just the kind of relationship that you have. So I want to always bring those kind of relationships. And the biggest lesson I've learned is, even if you might be working on different sides of an issue within Republican Party, I mean, we all went through that, right? In this primary and all the things that happen, eventually you're going to be on the same side again. So don't burn bridges. Okay. Do not burn bridges. Be professional, deal with your political differences, but you're going to need each other again sometime. So for example, you might have supported somebody different in the presidential primary, but when you get to the presidential election, we all got to be on the same team. That's right. That's the best lesson I've learned from politics.
That's really good. I think very, very important. I actually was thinking about that because I know that there's a lot of political people who they're very politically inclined, very involved, et cetera, constituents. And they get very upset when somebody's not like super hard line, this and that. But sometimes I'm like, it's not that I want to always give up what I want. It's that if we want to get something done, everybody wants to get something done, the left and the right. So you're going to have to negotiate and play fair and play balanced with people sometimes. I just think we would get a lot more done. And we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. What about your work in Iraq? I was thinking about this and going, wow, this woman has done quite a bit of work that it's not typical for women. Let's be honest about that. Can you share with our viewers a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, I really just look at doing a good job. I know when I first started, I first entered the workforce out of college in 1980, and I was probably what you would call a diversity hire. They needed more women in the business that I was in. And I knew that I probably got the job because I was a woman, but I wasn't going to keep the job because I was a woman. And I've always been aware of that. Okay. Good. I don't mind if someone wants to give me a job because I'm a woman or they need a woman. I certainly do a lot of work within political circles and bringing women's groups along and things like that. But I think women's issues are everybody's issues. I don't like people kind of boxing in women's issues of being just related to reproductive issues or education. We care about everything, and we manage most of the households in America. So we care about the economy. We care about jobs. We care about opportunities for our children. So I just like to make the tent bigger. I want to make the tent bigger wherever I go because again, I think our ideas are better.
That's powerful. I may have gotten it because I'm a woman, but I'm not keeping it because I'm a woman. I love that. I love that. I may have misquoted you there, but you get the idea. I absolutely love that. Okay, so I'm sure let's talk about some current events here. I was watching, of course, the Congress pay raise, and I thought, well, how exciting. You're either hating this or loving this. And I want to show a clip real quick. Here we go.
Gail, you talked about members of Congress getting a raise.
Right.
The question is, should they?
No.
I mean, you say no. Mondaire, what do you say?
They look, members of Congress, if they got paid more, I think would be less likely to engage in the kind of corruption that we have seen.
It's been, what, 10 years?
It has been since 2009, is my understanding, since members of Congress got a raise. And this is by exemption. I mean, it should be automatic in the way other salaries in the federal government are, but it's because they voted to do precisely this. And so the recent proposal of raising the salary by $6,600 is still much less than it would have been if those automatic increases that everyone else in the federal government benefits from.
Okay, let's talk about this. It's the first raise in 19 years since 2009. Actually, I was thinking about the math and I thought, well, back then it was a little, that kind of salary was, it was very generous, great. But now we're, 19 years later, and we're talking $6,600 per year. I have an SUV, Martha, and let me tell you, that's probably gas per year. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I know that the public is either outraged or just going, it's not, it's fair. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not outraged, but I don't think they shouldn't be comfortable in the job they're in. Okay. I think of one of the biggest mistakes they ever made is making members of Congress regular federal employees where they have all the benefits and all the perks and all that stuff, because then they want to work long enough to get retirement. They want to get I don't think that's what an elected official should be. I think they're at 174,000 a year. And I think that the leadership makes about 220 or something like that. And yes, that is true that in Washington, D.C., that may not be a lot. But here's the thing. They make 174,000, but they live like they make $500,000 because they get a car that's on top of that, okay, that belongs to the office. They have a driver and a scheduler and a person that handles things for them. Those are all people that we're paying their salaries because they're staff people. And the reason why they have a driver is you never want your name on a ticket. Okay, so you have a driver so that you can be working in the car while the person's driving. So they are living like they make a lot more money and they get treated like they make a lot more money. Mm-hmm. I don't like the idea of entitlement. So again, I'm not outraged. I understand that cost of living has gone up a lot in 19 years, but I think they were a bit overpaid 19 years ago compared to what everybody was in there. Yes. And they also get an allowance for housing and things like that. I think that you should want to have somebody that wants to do the job for a few years and then leave. And if you create a situation where it's a career, then they don't want to leave. And you end up with half the leadership being over 80 years old, which is what we've got right now.
Right. Yeah. So it begs the question about term limits. I mean, so, where are we with that? Those are.
Look, I'm in favor of term limits, but also we need to have term limits on the bureaucrats, because what the Biden administration is doing right now is trying to fill a bunch of jobs on the government sector side, the bureaucrat side, so that when the Trump administration comes in, that they can't get rid of them and they can't put their own people in. I think there should be not only term limits for elected officials, we have them for the president. Why wouldn't we have them for everybody else? Most governors are term limited, but you do need to have term limits, I think, on the bureaucrats. I don't think, and it doesn't mean that they can't stay in federal government, but they need to move around a little bit more. This business that you've got somebody that's been in a job for 40 years, I don't think that's the best way to spend the American people's money. And we can't forget, government does not have $1 without us giving it to them. It is not their money. It is our money.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. I also believe that a lot of people aren't really informed on it. So like what you were just talking about, the federal side, it doesn't, I don't think people think about that. You enlightened me a little bit and I thought, oh yes, you forget about that stuff.
I'll be honest with you. I was a term limit person for a long time. And when I ran for Congress, my opponent, Doug Collins, who is now up for the VA secretary, who beat me, and we ended up working together well because we would need each other again. It's a perfect example of that. But he pointed out when we were running, he says, Martha, it's great to have term limits, but we need it on the bureaucrats too. Yes, and I thought to myself, you know what, that's a good point, because a lot of these folks think they can wait out because most of them are Democrats. Let's be honest. If you work in Washington, D.C. and you're a federal government worker, by their own identification, about 87% of them are Democrats. So their attitude is, well, we'll get a Republican president, but we can wait them out. We'll just dig our heels in until the next Democratic president comes in, and then we'll get on steroids. So I think we need to have a much smaller federal government. I agree with the idea of taking some of these departments. Like, why does the Department of Agriculture need to be in Washington, D.C.? Why wouldn't we move it out to an area where actually agriculture is a business? Let's try to make things spread out. And I would say use a lot more state university staff people instead of everybody being from the Ivy League. That's one thing that Rex Tillerson instituted at the State Department. I know he wasn't there very long, but that was one policy he put in place that really helped the State Department, was getting more people from public universities and not everybody from the Ivy League.
Well, I mean, that sounds like a great idea, Martha, but I think you also know that there's a lot of liberal brainwashing going on in the universities. I've had to deal with some of that stuff myself. So definitely, I mean, I think it's great, though. I hope that maybe, the Trump administration, maybe while he's in there, he can do as much as he can in the 4 years, which feels like a minute, because, there's so much work to do, with that. So some of the reasons why people are, outraged, they're for the raise because of inflation, just going back to it a little bit, attracting diverse talent. Maybe people who maybe wouldn't be able to get in typically, et cetera. And then reducing corruption. I don't know that. The first thing I thought was, yeah, right. Corruption is corruption. If you're willing to be corrupt, has nothing to do with how much money you make. What do you think of that?
No, I agree with you about that. It was funny when I had about a $70,000 debt when I finished up my campaign, because you make a lot of decisions at the end that you don't know exactly how much they're going to cost, but you want to win. And so I went back to work, and because I didn't want to go back on the air with political debt. Now, political debt doesn't show up anywhere. Okay. But so you really don't have to pay it back. But I was going to pay mine back because all the political debt I had was people's staff salaries. So I wanted to make sure my people got paid. But I had someone accuse me of taking a payoff to support someone for my campaign debt. And I remember saying to him, I said, look, if I were going to take a payoff, you would never see me again, because it would be retirement money. If I was going to compromise my values for money, it would be a lot of money. Okay.
There you go. So right.
I just think that you're right. You're either built that way or you're not built that way.
That's right.
I think that, again, the gentleman's comment, and I didn't know who that was, that said it would reduce corruption. That's a person that looks at a congressional position as a lifelong position. Okay, that's going to be your career, is being a congressperson. I just think that's just the wrong way to look at it. And there is a lot of diverse talent in Congress. Look at the makeup of Congress today compared to where it was 20 years ago. There are a lot more women. There are a lot more diverse people. There's diverse people in the Republican Party and in the Democrat Party. So I just don't buy that argument. But I understand people want to make more money wherever they are. I mean, heck, our state legislators in Georgia only make about $23,000 a year. So it is really something where you have to have another job. Now, to be fair, to be in Congress, you can't really have another job. So you have to basically give up. So I understand the argument, and I'm not saying never have a raise. And $6,600 doesn't sound that much. I mean, honestly, when you look at it, that's roughly about 3%, a 3% increase, which is roughly the cost of living for the last year. Right. I don't, it's not like a hill I'm going to die on. I just don't think that Congress people they forget that it's not just the salary. You get a car that you don't have to pay for. You've got a driver, you've got a scheduler, you've got people picking up your dry cleaning. You've got all this kind of stuff that's kind of extra that's not in the salary. So you're really kind of making $500,000 a year when you add all that in.
Well, there you go, which leads us right into the spending bill, because obviously this is the perfect topic for this. You've seen what's going on with it, and what should the public know about this? Because I look at it and go, okay, I heard a conservative say something to me that, she was saying it to the table. several months ago. She said, I know as conservatives, we don't like to spend money. We like to cut. I get that. She
We
said,
don't do it though.
yes, that too. She said, but you have to at some point increase something. If you want better roads, you have to increase the budget. If you want, better school systems, you have to increase the budget, etc. And I thought, I think that sometimes we forget, and this is my life model right now, and I tell people this. I say this several times a week. More than one thing can be true at the same time. So, yes, we want to cut, but also, are there some necessary spending things going on? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I think that you got to look at it as it relates to local, state, and federal government. Okay.
Mhm.
I think on the local and state level, you get to the end of your driveway, you expect a road to be there, and the government needs to pay for that. But we are close to those people. Like you see them in the grocery store, you see them at school, you see them around, so you can hold them accountable. Okay, for your property tax or for the other kinds of taxes that you have. And I think that we do a much better job, state and local, because we are holding these folks accountable all along the way. The problem with the federal government is they get this bubble where they can print money. Okay.
Mhm.
And because of that, there's been no oversight and there's been no looking at a budget. Lee Iacocca famously wrote, he was the former chairman of Chrysler that brought him out of all the difficulty, he created the Mustang. I mean, he was a brilliant guy. He said, you can cut 5% out of anything and not hurt the outcome. Yes, you do need to spend more money on certain things. But if you're not willing to go through and look at the budget and see what is outdated, there was recently a tax on our telephone that had been in place since World War I that they didn't take off until 2006. Okay. We've got to make sure we're doing that stuff. I got to interview John Lewis about 20 years ago, a number of times, but the first time was about 20 years ago. And we were talking about the budget and shutting down the government famously, which has not gotten any better in the last 44 years. We've had 2 balanced budgets in the last 44 years, and we've done it on time twice in the last 44 years. But I said to him, Congressman Lewis, I could make a list of 20 things to cut, and you could make a list of 20 things to cut. Probably wouldn't completely agree, but I bet we could find 3 or 4 we could agree on. And he said, Martha, I'm a partisan, but you've got a point. And that's what the thing is. We've got to be willing to work. And that's why we got to get back on regular order. If we get back on regular order, we're going to fix this. And here's what I would do if I were queen of the world. Okay. I go back to the 2019 budget, and this isn't my idea. This is Rand Paul's idea. You go back to the 2019 budget, which is pre-COVID, and we had $1 trillion deficit that year. So it wasn't like it was a small budget. Okay. We overspent by $1 trillion. Adjusted for inflation, that would bring us to about $5.4 trillion. That would be what we're taking in right now. It would basically be a balanced budget, and it would be a budget without COVID spending that had increased by 22% in the last 5 years. So there's a way to do it if people would be reasonable and go through what's called regular order. But we haven't done that but twice in the last 44 years, to the point where sometimes when you talk to a citizen about things like conference committees, they don't even know what you're talking about because because it's been so long since we've done this. Now, the final point I want to make on that is that we didn't used to have these government shutdowns. That only started in the late 70s, early 80s with something called Graham-Rudman. Prior to that, everybody just assumed you were going to come to an agreement. So the government just kept going. And they got to an agreement. Sometimes it'd be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but they didn't shut the government down. Since they've done this, they've turned it into a political tool. And they used it against Republicans very effectively. Republicans are terrified of the government shutting down. And we've got to not be afraid of this. And we've got to go through what's called regular order. And that means you go through the committee process, you go through and you vote each appropriation bill out. And the way to start it is to start it now. We've got to start it now for this year, or else we're just going to be here again next Christmas. And we can't do that.
Do you foresee that people will start, coming to meet each other, and say, okay, I can negotiate, you can negotiate, because there's so much talk about how it's a Trump idea, and now there's a clashing of parties. I mean, do you see that happening, that they will actually be able to get along a little bit for the sake of the American people? We're not in a position to keep this going.
I think there are enough Democrats that are in districts that President Trump carried that for at least the next 2 years, we have the opportunity to have people work with us. Of course, they're not looking like it right now because they're about to go out of office, a number of them. Okay.
Mm.
So this is their last gasp that they're going to be putting forward. But I do think that when we get to the new Congress, that you're going to have a real opportunity with John Thune, even though he's a more establishment Republican, to be able to bring some of these Democrats along that are in Republican states. John Ossoff is one of my senators, and he is in a state that went for Donald Trump. You're going to see him being a lot more reasonable. I think you're going to see that also. I mean, AOC's district voted for Donald Trump. Okay. They voted for her and they voted for Donald Trump.
Yes.
She's going to have to work with that. So
Mhm.
I think there's some opportunity there. I'm a bit Pollyanna. I admit it. I'm an optimist. You know, my husband is half empty and I'm half full, and together we make a full glass. So I understand I'm a little bit optimistic, but I think we can work together.
Well, speaking of AOC, I mean, she seemed to want to understand. She was saying she genuinely was trying to understand. She wasn't trying to berate somebody. She was really trying to understand what made the people who voted for her and Trump vote that way. So, hey, I hope that she will come across the aisle, and vice versa, because I've seen conservatives behave a certain way as well. This is a two-party issue here going
Well, a
on.
perfect example was in 2017, President Trump went to Nancy Pelosi and said on the Dreamers, which the Dreamers are the kids that come here,
Mhm.
and said, I will not only give you the Dreamers, but I'll give you their parents. That's 2.2 million, but I'd like 5 billion for the wall. And Nancy Pelosi said no. That was a good deal by anybody's standards. And it set a bad precedent that everybody was going to say no to Donald Trump. I think they've learned, though, because you actually can see how much better things were under the first Trump administration.
Yes.
And in a weird way, him being out of office for 4 years may have helped him in the
Yes.
long run. I love the attitude he's taking through the
Yes.
transition. I love the way he's approaching things. I think I feel very optimistic about where things are going.
Well, actually, this is a great transition, because my next topic is about his cabinet picks. And we'd mentioned this briefly on your radio show, but talking about the very moderate, I'm going to call it balanced, just because I'm super far right for the most part, balanced in the sense that it's serving everybody. And I personally believe that this is a good time for liberals, Democrats, anti-Trumpers, to really calm down. And I don't mean that in a derogatory manner. I mean, calm down for a second. Let's give the man a chance, because instead of bringing only right-wing people, he's bringing quite the balance. You're talking about Vivek and Tulsi Gabbard and so many. And I know there's more, and I know there's more coming. So what do you say to our American viewers who are going, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And guess what, Martha, what about the very conservative ones who are actually concerned about the more moderate people coming in?
Well, first of all, we want cabinet members to do their job. And we know that we're going to have a president that's actually going to have cabinet meetings and he's going to give direction, unlike Joe Biden. The cabinet secretaries today are just doing their own thing because they haven't met with Joe Biden in 2.5 years. And so they're just doing their own thing. But let's just take the noise away from Donald Trump, which is hard to do. He's not a radical right winger. Okay. Right. If you listen to how he talks about abortion, if you listen to how he talks about immigration, really, if you look at what Tom Homan is actually saying about what he's going to do versus what right wingers would want him to do, Donald Trump's not a right winger. He's not a moderate either. Okay. He is, because moderate means you don't really stand for anything, but he is more of a center right kind of guy. And so I think what he's doing is reflecting that in his cabinet picks. And of course, I think that Robert Kennedy came along and helped him quite a bit. My biggest problem is with Robert Kennedy. Not that I don't like him and I don't like the Make America Healthy Again and all that, is that he is probably the most liberal as far as things like abortion and being head of HHS, which is the largest department in the government. I'm a little concerned about that. I'm a little concerned about his views on the Second Amendment, but I trust Donald Trump. I trust him to make good picks. And good picks doesn't mean you never change them. A lot of people criticized him for changing people. I think being a good leader is knowing when to change people and not just leaving people in a job they're not qualified for. So I think all in all, now that Matt Gaetz is out, because Matt Gaetz had a lot of problems that were just not going to be solved through a confirmation hearing, I think that and there will be one or two more that won't make it all the way, because that's just the way it is. It's not because it's Donald Trump. It happened under Bush, Obama, Clinton, you name it. There'll be one or two that won't make it. But I think all in all, it's a good cabinet, but it's a good cabinet because Trump is going to be leading the cabinet. He is not going to be just letting them do whatever they want to do.
No, he won't. And I can't remember the situation, but I remember him dealing with someone in that manner. Like, okay, that's great, but that's not what I want to do. And I said, well, there's the Trump we know. And also, you just made a point that it's exactly what I was saying. You just said you were concerned. Where so many people who are, to the left, very progressive, they're super concerned about Trump and his picks and everything that everyone he's appointing. However, this goes both ways. It goes both ways. We are also, as those of us who may be concerned about the abortion issues, et cetera, we may go, oof, I hope this man doesn't put his hand too heavy in the cookie jar kind of thing. So I think it's great. I think this part of the conversation is so essential so that people can understand that this is what it looks like when America belongs to everybody, right? Unfortunately, I hate to say that because the truth is I don't like to share my America because I want it all to be conservative, but that's not how this goes. We all live here, and so we're going to have to learn. I also hope that this presidency will turn things around, Martha, for just for our nation, so that we can go from pulling it from that nutty left progressive, even more to the center, even if it's not as right as I would like it to go, but let's pull it away so that our children can have a chance to grow up in a mentally healthy America, and spiritually healthy and politically healthy. What do you say to that?
No, I agree. And I think we are a center-right country. And I like to use the example of baseball analogy, right? So the baseball analogy is it's a shorter distance from right field to center field than it is from left field to center field in the way the players are set up. So we are closer to what the American people want than the far left is. And they're just nutty, and they were broken in this election. Okay. And they haven't gotten the message yet. Not the leaders. The leaders haven't gotten the message yet. No. But the rank and file, the Democrats have lost the working class. They have lost the people. And all they have is the elites. And look, I've got 2 degrees, so I guess I'm an elite. I don't know. But they lost the working class. And they've lost places like California. California's going to be Republican in our lifetime again. New York's going to be Republican in our lifetime again. And this is going to be a golden age if we play our cards right. And I said to Mike Johnson when I interviewed him at the Republican convention, I said to him, Mike, I have given you, not necessarily you, but the Republicans, all the power 3 times in my life. How do I know that you're going to do anything any differently?
That's right.
And we have to take this opportunity to hold their feet to the fire and make sure, and not by being mean or nasty, but by reminding them that we have given you the power, and there's certain things we expect you to do.
Absolutely. And by the way, I don't know if you've heard, but there's people already calling for a new speaker.
I'm sure they are. I think he has a difficult position with just 1 or 2 seats. And I really wish President Trump would stop nominating members of Congress, okay, because we have a tight enough majority as it is for us to have all these special elections. Far be it for me to tell him what to do, but we need to, we need to keep our majority, because if it drops below, then it's going to be Hakeem Jeffries, and we don't need that.
No, I heard him speaking this morning. I said, oh, no, thank you for that. No. Martha, this has been such a just rich conversation with you. Are there any last words you'd like to tell our viewers? We get this one chance to talk to somebody who's made some dents in the conservative political movement. What are some things you'd like to leave our viewers with?
just talk to people, strike up conversations and deal with people. It'll all be good. It'll all be good if we do that.
There you go. Well, there you have it, my friends. We're on with Martha Zoller. Where can they find you and where can they listen to your radio program?
Go to marthazoller.com, and I look forward to, engaging with you.
There you go. Well, my viewers, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. I hope that you learned something. We like to empower and inspire people to go out and do something wonderful. And hey, my mentor, Martha, told me, she was my political campaign school mentor. And one of the things that she said when I interviewed her is, if you think a woman should run, tell her. And so that's what I would like to leave our viewers with. If you think a woman could do something wonderful, tell her, so that she can go out and continue to multiply the wonderful work. And like you said, if you get in because you're a woman, you're not keeping it because you're a woman. You're keeping it because
we're in
you
the majority. We need to act like it.
There you go. There you go. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Teresa.
You take care. Bye-bye.